The Holbein room is one of the great highlights of the Kunstmuseum in Basel. Between 1515 and 1526, Holbein lived and worked in Basel, and the museum's collection of his early work is unmatched. But the quiet of the Holbein room is deceptive. These were troubled times. In the religious commotion of the Reformation, a vast number of works of art were removed from their original setting and destroyed. And so in 1526, a worried Holbein left Basel for London. 2 years later, he was back, probably concerned about the safety of his family. This intimate portrait of his wife and her 2 children comes from this time. It is one of the very few pictures Holbein painted for himself, without being commissioned to do so. Unfortunately, it is no longer in its original state. The figures, painted on paper, have been cut out and pasted on a panel. Another hand has filled in the background. In the picture, Holbein's wife wears an expression of deep sadness, and the life of Elsbeth Bizenstock was in truth marked by worries and sorrow. Married to a tanner at a very young age, she was already a widow at 22. She married Hans Holbein in 1515 and was to bear him 4 children. At the time of this painting, only 2 had been born. Her son Philipp, aged 7, and her daughter Katharina, seen here as a 2-year-old. Both children cling tenderly to their mother. Philipp is shown in profile. He stares piously and attentively out of the picture at something we cannot see. He seems very serious and grown up for a boy of his age. He wears a dark green jerkin, and the white collar of his shirt emerges from the neck opening. His mother lays her hand on his shoulder in a tender gesture, but Holbein has left the hand unfinished. Holbein's small daughter, Katharina, sits on her mother's lap. She too turns to the right. Her light brown pinafore and white blouse are as pale as her face and her blonde hair. Once again, her expression, tearful and earnest, seems too serious for the face of a 2-year-old child. The corners of her mouth are turned sadly down, and her eyes, somewhat tired, gaze into the distance. The mother shares the troubling seriousness of her children. Her bust, rising from the deep décolletage of her dress, is unadorned and plain. Her head is bent slightly forward. Her attention seems to be directed entirely inwards, to her own thoughts. Red-rimmed eyes, as if she has been crying, give Holbein's wife a careworn appearance. It's difficult to believe that this is the portrait of a young woman of only 32. Holbein, the greatest court portraitist of his time, painter of kings and queens, is allowing us an intimate look into his own private world. Brown and beige shades dominate the color scheme, endowing the picture with an autumnal sadness. In the early 16th century, this kind of intimate family portrait was still uncommon. It had been developed by the wayward Venetian genius, the contemporary of Holbein, Lorenzo Lotto, from images of the Holy Family. In Lotto's family portraits, husband and wife turn to each other with affection and comfort their children. Lotto's picture glows with domestic harmony and happiness. In Holbein's portrait, Elsbeth is alone with her children, who turn to the right, as if searching for a missing presence, the presence of Holbein himself, the father who would complete the group and bring back happiness. Holbein's fatherless family group reminds us strongly of Renaissance images of the Madonna with the infant Christ and John the Baptist. It was a type of picture developed in Italy, which found its most perfect form in the Madonnas and infant Christs of Raphael. Holbein would certainly have known similar compositions from reproductions and engravings. Holbein has adopted the scheme of the Madonna with children to present his own family group in a sacred and loving light. His picture does indeed seem like a devotional image. In particular, the pious upward gaze of the young boy, but also the introverted sadness of the mother. Holbein often seems to blur the boundaries between the sacred and the profane in his work, between simple people and saints or figures from classical mythology. In this portrait of Magdalena Offenberg, a great beauty of Basel, notorious for her loose morals, the artist casts her as Venus, the goddess of love, accompanied by Amorini. Elsewhere, he dresses her up as a courtesan in the image of Lais of Corinth. Magdalena came from a leading Basel family. There was much gossip at the time about Holbein's relationship with her. The coins shown here in her open hand are quite unambiguous in their significance. Finally, Holbein used her features for the face of the famous Madonna, which he painted in 1526, shortly before his departure for London, for the mayor of Basel, Jacob Meyer von Hassen. Clearly, Magdalena Offenberg embodied for Holbein an ideal of female beauty in its many forms, from courtesan to Mother of God. Holbein could not have emphasized more clearly the difference between the glamorous Magdalena and his own sad wife, Elsbeth, prematurely aged through worry and loneliness, left alone in Basel to look after her children, which, judging from the portrait, she would surely have done with care and love. In 1529, a wave of Reformation iconoclasm hit Basel. Holbein witnessed the destruction of his own pictures. The town authorities tried to stop the famous artist from leaving by commissioning him to decorate the town hall with an ambitious fresco. 2 faded fragments of this work are all that survive. It failed to provide Holbein with reason enough to stay in Basel. In 1532, he left the town for good and moved to London. His family stayed behind. Holbein produced only one self-portrait. This drawing dates from shortly before his death. Its Latin inscription reads, "Johann Holbein from Basel has shown himself here at the age of 45. In 1543, having become the official painter to the royal court of Henry VIII, Holbein died of plague. One of his jobs for the royal court had been to paint the future wives of Henry VIII. He went back to Basel only once, for a few weeks. Having hardly seen him for the last 11 years of his life, Elsbeth sold this portrait before her husband's death. She was probably in need of the money.